3:16, 15:16. Israel Standard Time, Daf Yomi, Tractate Makos, or Makos, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, top of the page with the words Amar, Rav Yehuda Amarav, Ni doyal tonight, Tzarich Efach, Amadalan Yehuda Dichsiv, Im lo Yosef Elecha Degoymel, V'Amar Rabbi Shmuel Amar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yoinasan, Mai Dichtiv, Yechir Uven, Ve'al Yamos, Ve'gomer V'zot Lihuda. Apropos declarations that take effect even if they were stated conditionally and the condition was not fulfilled, Rav Yehuda says, ostracism that was declared conditionally requires nullification, even though the condition was not fulfilled. From where do we derive this? It is derived from Judah, as is written with regard to his request that his father allow the brothers to take Benjamin to Egypt. If I do not bring him to you, I would have sinned to you for all days. Genesis 43:9. Meaning, I will remain ostracized as a sinner. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Rabbi Yonatan says, what is the meaning of that which is written? Let Reuben live and not die. Deuteronomy 33:6, followed immediately by the verse, and this for Judah. Deuteronomy 33:7. Why was the blessing of Judah linked to that of Reuben? Kol osad 40 shana shehu Yisrael bamidbar atzmotav shel Yehuda hayu megulgalim ba'aroin ad she'amad Moshe ubikesh elav rachamim. Amar lefanav Rabbanu shel olam mi garem leReuben sheyoyde Yehuda v'zois Yehuda shema Hashem kol Yehuda. Throughout those 40 years that the children of Israel were in the wilderness, Judah's bones were rattling in the coffin, detached from one another, because the ostracism that he declared upon himself remained in effect until Moses stood and entreated God to have mercy upon him. Moses said before him, Master of the universe, who caused Reuben to confess his sin with Bilhah? It was Judah. Judah's confession to his sin with Tamar led Reuben to confess to his own sin. Moses continued, and this is for Judah. Hear God, the voice of Judah. Deuteronomy 33:7. Al ibre l'shapa lo adekamai lile limitav drakia ve'al imot tivienu lo haveka yada lemishkal mitrach mishumat v'hadi rabanan yadav rav lo haya yada leploki kushya ve'ezer mitzarav tiye. At that point his limbs entered their designated place and no longer rattled, but the heavenly court still would not allow him to enter the heavenly academy. Moses continued, and bring him to his people, Deuteronomy 33:7, so that he may join the other righteous people in heaven. That request was also granted, but Judah did not know how to engage in the give and take of halacha with the sages in the heavenly academy. Moses continued, his hands shall contend for him. Deuteronomy 33:7, that request was also granted, but Judah did not know how to resolve any difficulty raised to reject his opinion until Moses prayed, and you shall be a help against his adversaries. Deuteronomy 33:7. Ibayilehu b'misas kulanum choizer oy dilma b'misas echad mehen. The Mishnah enumerates those high priests whose death facilitates the return of unintentional murderers to their homes from the city of refuge to which they fled. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Is it only with the death of all of the high priests enumerated in the Mishnah that the unintentional murder returns? Or perhaps is it even with the death of one of them that he returns? Tashema Nigmar dina bela kohen gadol Ein yoytzi misham le'olam. B'yamisa le'adar b'dihanach b'dileka. The Gemara suggests coming here a resolution to the dilemma from the succeeding Mishnah. If the verdict of a murderer was decided at a time when there was no one filling the position of high priest, he never leaves the city of refuge. And if it is so that the death of any of those listed in the Mishnah facilitates his return, let him return with the death of one of these other high priests, the one who was sanctified by donning the 8 vestments, or a priest who was relieved of his position. The Gemara rejects the proof. The Mishnah is referring to a case where there were no high priests when the verdict was decided. New Mishnah. Mishanig Mardina Meis Kohen Gadol Habezeinu Goyle. Im ad shelo nigmar dina Meis Kohen Gadol Uminach Hartachto Uliachar Mikan nigmar dino Chozer b'misaso shel sheni Nigmar dina v'la Kohen Gadol V'hoire Kohen Gadol Kohen Gadol sheharag eino yoetzi misham le'olam. If after the unintentional murder's verdict was decided and he was sentenced to exile, the high priest died, he is not exiled as the death of the high priest exempts him from exile. If it was before his verdict was decided, the high priest died, and they appointed another in his place, and thereafter his verdict was decided, he returns from exile with the death of the second high priest. If the verdict of a murder was decided at a time when there was no high priest, and likewise in the cases of one who unintentionally killed a high priest, and in the case of a high priest who killed unintentionally, the unintentional murderer never leaves the city of refuge. If the high priest kills someone unintentionally, I don't understand, why does he just go out when the high priest dies, even in exile? Okay. Anyway, in your say this mitzvah, v'lo yedes mamon, v'lo yedes neboshes, v'afil Yisrael tzrich meloi, v'afil sar tzvo Yisrael ki yoy ben tziruyo, en yoytzim misham lo oila. Shne'emar asher nas shama, sham tehei dirasoi, sham tehei misasoi, sham tehei kivurasoi. And one who is exiled may not leave the city at all, either for testimony relating to a mitzvah, or for testimony relating to monetary matters, or for testimony relating to capital matters. And even if the Jewish people require his services, and even if he is the general of the army of Israel, like Joab ben Zeruiah, he never leaves the city of refuge, as it is stated, and the congregations restore him to his city of refuge, and that he fled there. Numbers 35:25, from which it is derived, there shall be his dwelling, there shall be his death, there shall be his burial. Kishem shel koletes, kach techum kolet, רוצח שיצא חוץ לתחום, ומצוי גוי לדם, וביוסי הגלילי אומר, מצווה ביד הגוי לדם, ורשוס ביד כל אדם. רבי עקיבא אומר, רשוס ביד כל אדם, וכל אדם חי ונולד. The Mishnah continues, just as an unintentional murder is admitted to the city of refuge, so he is admitted to its outskirts, located within the Shabbat boundary. Once he entered the outskirts of the city, the blood redeemer may not kill him. In a case where a murder emerged beyond the Shabbat boundary of the city of refuge, and the blood redeemer found him there, Rabbi Yossi Agnili says it is a mitzvah for the blood redeemer to kill him, and it is optional for every other person to do so. Rabbi Akiva says it is optional for the blood redeemer, and every other person is liable for killing him. Okay, Gemara says, my time, מי שגלה קבל, יצא עכשיו מי שלא גלה אין הדין שלא יגלה, ודילמה היי דיגלה יכפר להי דלא גלה Mi digalas ka michabra misas kohen hu the michabra. The Mishnah teaches, if after the unintentional murderer's verdict was decided and he was sentenced to exile, the high priest died, the unintentional murderer is not exiled. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for this? The Bible says it is derived through an a fortiori inference called the Chomer. If one who was already exiled now emerged with the death of the high priest, with regard to one who was not yet exiled, is it not right that he should not be exiled? The Gemara rejects this reasoning, and perhaps with regard to this one, who was already exiled, his sin was atoned for by his exile. Therefore, the death of the high priest facilitates his return. But that one who was not yet exiled, no, his sin was not atoned for, and the death of the high priest should not prevent his exile. The Gemara rebuts, is it his exile that atones for his sin? It is the death of the high priest that atones for his sin, and the high priest died. Iman shelo nigbar dino v'chulei minah nimili amar Rav Kahana de'Makos v'yasher ba'ad Moisei Kohen HaGadol asher moshach oso b'shem HaKodesh v'chi hu moshcho ela zeh shenimshach b'yamav. The Mishnah teaches, if it was before his verdict was decided that the high priest died, and they appointed another in his place, and thereafter his verdict was decided, he returns with the death of the second high priest. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rav Kahana said that they are derived from a verse. As the verse states, and he shall dwell there until the death of the high priest, whom he anointed with the sacred oil. Numbers 35:25. Now, is it the unintentional murderer who anoints the high priest? Rather, the reference is to that high priest who was anointing during his days, after he committed the unintentional murder. The Gemara asks, why is his return home dependent on the death of the second high priest? Earlier in 11a, the Gemara explained that the high priest bears a share of the responsibility for unintentional murderers, as he should have pleaded for mercy for his generation, and he did not do so. In this case, as the high priest in question was appointed only after the murder transpired, what could he have done to prevent the unintentional murder? The Gemara answers he should have pleaded for mercy that the verdict of the unintentional murder would be decided by the court favorably, so that he would not be sentenced to exile, and he did not plead. Amar Abaye naktinan nigmar dino v'meis molichen es atzmo Yisrael lishom nichsiv l'shuv sheves ba'aretz ad Moisei Kohen ve'ezu yeshiva shehu ba'aretz Daf Yomi ze kvura Tana meis koidim shemeis Kohen Gadol molichen atzmo sav al kivre avoysav dichsiv Yehoshua otziach al eretz achuzato. Ez yeshiva shehi be'eretz achuzato. Daf Yomi ze kvura. Abaye said, we have a tradition that with regard to an unintentional murderer whose verdict was decided and who was sentenced to exile, and he died, before he was exiled to the city of refuge, one transports his bones to the city of refuge and buries him there, as it is written, to return and dwell in the land until the death of the high priest. Numbers 35:32. And what is the dwelling that is in the land? You must say it is referring to his burial. A sage taught, if an unintentional murderer died in a city of refuge before the high priest died, one transports his bones to the graves of his ancestors after the high priest dies. As it is written, the murderer shall return to his ancestral land. Numbers 35:28. What is the dwelling that is taking place in his ancestral land? You must say it is his burial. Nigmar dino V'nas HaKoyen ben Gusha ben Chutza. Pligi bar Rabbi Ami bar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Avcha. Chad Omer Mesa Kahuna v'Chad Omer Bat LaKahuna. The Gemara cites a dispute with regard to a case where the murder's verdict was decided, meaning he was sent to exile. The high priest, filling the position at the time, was deemed the son of a divorced woman, the son of a chalutza, and the high priest was thereby disqualified from the priesthood. Ami Rabbi Yitzchak Nafa disagree with regard to this matter. One says the priesthood died, meaning it is as though the high priest died, and all exiles returned home from the city of refuge. And the other one says the priesthood is voided, meaning it is as though there was no high priest filling the position during that period, and therefore the exiles may never leave the city of refuge. Okay. It's none. Haya omed makriv al gav hamizbeach v'noid shahu ben grusha ben chalutza. Rabbi Eliezer omer kol korbanot sheikriv pesulin Rabbi Yehoshua machshav. The Gemara suggests, let us say, that these Amoraim, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, as we learned in the Mishnah, Trumot 8:1. If a priest was standing and sacrificing offerings upon an altar, and it became known that he was the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza, and he was disqualified from the temple service, Rabbi Eliezer says all offerings that he sacrificed up to that point are not valid, as it is apparent that he is not and never was fit for temple service. Rabbi Yehoshua deems all offerings that he already sacrificed as valid. Man de amar meisa Rabbi Yehoshua, uman de amar batla Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara explains, let us say, that the one who says here that the priesthood died holds in accordance with the opinion of Yehoshua. He holds that the high priest is disqualified only from the time of the discovery that he is disqualified from the priesthood and forward, while any service performed previous to that discovery is valid. Discovery that he is disqualified from the priesthood is like the high priest's death, but his priesthood is not invalidated retroactively. And the one who says that the priesthood is voided holds it according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. And since his priesthood is voided retroactively, there was no high priest filling the position when he was sentenced.